It was the kind of night that felt unnaturally still. No wind, no insects, no hum of distant traffic. Just silence, so deep that even the ticking of the kitchen clock seemed to echo through the walls. Sarah lay awake in her bed, eyes tracing the faint moonlight seeping through her half-drawn curtains. She wasn't sure what had woken her. Maybe it was the dream, the one she'd been having for weeks now, about someone standing outside her bedroom window. Or maybe it was the sense that something, somewhere, had changed in the air around her. The kind of shift you feel before something happens, though you don't know what. Then it came, 3 slow knocks, not loud, but unmistakable. Knock, knock, knock. They echoed faintly from downstairs, from the front door. Sarah froze, her breath catching halfway up her throat. She lived alone, and no one ever visited unannounced, especially not at this hour. For a moment, she told herself it must have been the pipes or the old wood settling. But the sound had been too deliberate, too human. She checked her phone, 3:17 a.m. Her pulse quickened as she sat up, every nerve in her body tightening with alertness. She listened for another sound, footsteps, voices, movement. But the silence returned, thicker than before. Against her better judgment, she slid out of bed and slipped her phone into her palm, its glow barely illuminating her trembling fingers. Each creak of the floorboard under her feet seemed to thunder through the house as she made her way to the top of the stairs. From there, she could see the faint outline of the front door below. The porch light was on, but it flickered faintly, as if struggling to stay alive. Her hand hovered over the stair railing, debating whether to call the police, or whether that would make her look foolish if it was nothing at all. Then she saw it, a shadowed at a figure standing just beyond the frosted glass of the front door. It wasn't moving, but she could tell it was human-shaped, broad shoulders, still posture, facing directly toward the house. Her throat went dry. The porch light flickered again, and for a split second, she thought she saw the faint outline of a face pressed close to the glass. But when the light steadied, the figure seemed gone. Her heart pounded as she took a step back. Maybe she had imagined it, her mind playing tricks in the half-light. And yet, she could feel something. Like the air was heavier, thicker, charged with the presence of someone who shouldn't be there. Just as she reached for her phone to dial 911. It rang, an incoming call from an unknown number. The sound nearly made her drop it. Who would call her in the middle of the night? She hesitated, then swiped to answer, whispering a cautious, "Hello?" But there was nothing on the other end. Not silence, exactly, just the faint sound of breathing. Slow, steady, male. Her skin prickled. Then the voice came, soft but distorted, as if spoken through static. "Don't open the door." Before she could respond, the call cut off, and downstairs, as if on cue, came another knock, this time louder. Sarah didn't move for a long moment. Her heart pounded in her ears, drowning out everything else. The hum of the fridge downstairs, the faint whine of the wind that had just started outside, the creak of the house's old bones. All she could think about was that voice on the phone. "Don't open the door." The warning echoed through her mind like a memory that didn't belong to her. Slowly, she lowered the phone and stared down the staircase again. The shape was still there. She could see it now, clearer than before. A man, tall, standing perfectly still under the flickering porch light. His face remained hidden in shadow, but she could see one of his hands pressed against the glass. The air inside the house felt heavier, like something unseen had seeped in through the cracks. Sarah stepped backward, her bare feet whispering against the cold wood floor. She needed to call the police, but her hands shook too violently to type. When she finally managed to press 911, the line didn't connect. No dial tone, no operator, just static. It was impossible. Her phone had full signal. The screen flickered for a moment, then went black. She stared at her reflection in the dark glass of the screen, her own terrified eyes staring back at her, before a quiet click echoed from downstairs. The sound of the front door handle turning. Sarah froze. Whoever was outside was trying the door now, slowly, deliberately, like they were testing it. She knew she'd locked it. She always locked it. But the handle kept twisting, metal scraping against metal. Then, suddenly, it stopped. Silence reclaimed the house once more, and in that silence, Sarah could hear her pulse, fast and frantic. Her instinct screamed to run back upstairs, to lock herself in her bedroom and hide. But another part of her, the part that needed to know, kept her rooted in place. What if someone needed help? What if this was all some strange misunderstanding? That thought was almost comforting. Almost. Then came the sound of footsteps. Not from the porch, but from inside. Soft, measured steps moving across the living room floor. Sarah's breath hitched. There was no mistaking it. Someone was inside her house. Panic surged through her chest like fire. She bolted up the stairs, her heart hammering as she stumbled into her bedroom. She slammed the door shut and locked it, pressing her back against it as she tried to quiet her breathing. Her mind was spinning, trying to make sense of what she'd heard. The windows were shut. The door had been locked. There was no way anyone could have gotten in. Unless, her eyes darted toward the far corner of the room, where a narrow attic hatch sat flush against the ceiling. It had always unnerved her, though she couldn't say why. Now, staring at it in the dark, she swore she saw it shift, just slightly, as if something had brushed against it from the other side. The air around her seemed to hum with tension. Her phone suddenly lit up in her hand again, bright enough to sting her eyes. A new message appeared on the screen. It was from the same unknown number as before. He's not outside anymore. Sarah sat frozen in her car, eyes locked on the handprint blooming against the windshield. The reflection of the man's face, gaunt, drenched, terrified, faded with the next flicker of lightning, leaving only her own wide-eyed stare. She forced herself to breathe, fumbling for the door handle. The gas station's glow pulled at her like a lifeline. She bolted into the rain, the storm swallowing her instantly, shoes slapping against the flooded pavement as she sprinted toward the glass doors. Behind her, the open car door slammed shut with a force she hadn't given it. Inside, Dylan stumbled between warped aisles, lungs burning, the pounding on the cooler still echoing in his ears. He thought he'd gone mad, trapped in some looping nightmare with no escape. But then the bell above the door chimed. He froze. For the first time since the blackout, the sound was real. Not an echo, not a trick of the storm. He spun toward the entrance, his chest lurching at the sight of a drenched woman stepping inside, her hair clinging to her face, her eyes darting wildly. She wasn't a figure from the cooler. She wasn't a reflection. She was flesh and blood, their eyes locked. For a second, relief flared through both of them, proof they weren't alone. Dylan staggered forward, words tumbling from his mouth. "You have to get out." But Sarah raised her hand, trembling, pointing past him. Her lips barely formed the words, "Behind you." Dylan's blood turned cold. He turned just enough to see the shelves bending again, boxes twisting, dripping shapes moving between them. The sound came back, too, the knock. Not from one place this time, but everywhere. The radio on the counter snapped to life, glowing red through the blackout. The voice bled through the static, calm and certain. And when they finally found each other, it was too late. The rain was already inside them both. Dylan grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her toward the counter. "Don't listen. Don't look. We have to go." She stumbled after him, but the aisles warped again, cutting them off from the door. The store groaned as though it were alive, the shelves shifting inward, funneling them toward the coolers. They pressed back to back, surrounded by dripping shadows closing in from every direction. Dylan clenched his fists, whispering to Sarah without turning his head, "If we split, we're dead. Whatever happens, stay with me." Sarah nodded, though tears streaked her rain-soaked cheeks. Lightning split the sky outside, and for a single, searing instant, the glass walls reflected the truth. The two of them weren't alone. Dozens of pale, soaked figures ringed the store from the outside, their faces pressed to the glass, their hands tapping softly in unison, waiting to be let in. Sarah's hands shook as she backed away from the crawlspace. The phone's vibrations still echoed in her palm. That cryptic message burned into her thoughts. "Don't let him find you." Her flashlight rolled on the floor, casting dizzy spirals of light across the ceiling. The air in the house seemed to shift again, heavier, thicker, like something unseen had drawn closer. Sarah forced herself to grab the phone and stumbled backward toward the kitchen. Her first thought was to get out, but her legs felt unsteady, as if she were wading through something invisible. The front door still gaped open, but the night outside looked different, thicker, darker, almost liquid in the way it swallowed the porch light's last flicker. She hit the call button again. This time, the phone dialed properly, the sound sharp and too loud in the quiet house. It rang once, twice, then a voice answered. 911, what's your emergency? Sarah exhaled a shaky breath, the relief making her knees weak. Someone's in my house, she whispered. Please, he's been here. I think he's still here. The operator's tone softened, calm but alert. Okay, ma'am, stay on the line. We're sending officers now. Are you in a safe place? Sarah opened her mouth to answer, but before she could speak, a faint creak came from behind her, the sound of a floorboard giving way under slow, deliberate weight. She turned, heart hammering, and pointed the flashlight toward the hallway. Nothing, just the empty corridor stretching into shadow. The light wavered as her breath quickened. He's here, she whispered into the phone. The operator's voice was faint now, distant through static. Ma'am? Stay calm. Can you describe? The line cut out again. Dead silence. Then, faintly, the call timer on her screen reset by itself, as if someone had ended the call from the other side. She lowered the phone, realizing she was hearing another sound now. A voice, low and muffled, coming from beneath the floor. It was whispering. She couldn't make out the words, but it was a man's voice, rising and falling in a rhythmic murmur. The whispering grew louder as she stepped closer to the crawlspace door. It wasn't coming from inside the space directly. It sounded deeper, like there was more beneath the house than she ever knew existed. Her fear battled with curiosity until her trembling hand reached for the small flashlight again. She crouched and aimed the beam into the darkness. The crawlspace was empty now. The scrap of fabric she'd seen before was gone, and the handprint had smudged, as if someone had dragged their fingers through it. But the whispering continued, faint and wet, like breath against the earth itself. Sarah's heart thudded painfully in her chest. She began to back away. Then something moved behind her. The whispering stopped instantly. She turned, and for a moment, she thought she saw someone standing in the kitchen doorway. A tall figure, motionless in the half-dark. Her light flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. The room plunged into blackness. Sarah's breath came fast, her phone shaking in her hand as she turned the screen on for light. The figure was gone. In its place, faint letters had been scrawled on the floor in dust, letters that hadn't been there before. He never left. Sarah didn't remember dialing again. Her hands worked on instinct, trembling as she pressed 911 once more and stammered out her address. This time, the operator stayed on the line until the distant wail of sirens filtered through the cold night air. When she finally stepped outside, barefoot and shaking, the dawn light was beginning to break, a dull gray glow spreading over the horizon. Two police cruisers pulled up along the curb, their red and blue lights slicing through the mist. The sight should have brought relief. Instead, Sarah felt the opposite. The house behind her loomed quiet and heavy, like it was listening. The officers moved quickly, one speaking softly to her while the other entered the house with a flashlight. She tried to explain everything. The knocks, the voice, the crawlspace, but the words tumbled out unevenly. He was inside, she said, her voice raw. Someone was here. I saw him. The officer nodded, calm and patient, the way people are when they're trying not to feed someone's panic. Inside, she could hear the muffled echo of footsteps as the second officer moved from room to room. Then came his voice. Basement's clear. No sign of forced entry except the front door. You sure he didn't leave before we got here? Sarah shook her head. He was under the stairs. There were footprints. A message written on the floor. Her words came faster, desperate for them to believe her. The first officer's brow furrowed. A message. She nodded, leading them back inside. Her feet hesitated at the threshold, the air colder inside than it had any right to be. The kitchen looked the same as she'd left it, except the writing was gone. The dust had been disturbed, footprints smeared, the space clean as though someone had wiped it all away. The crawlspace door stood shut. Even the faint smell she'd noticed earlier was gone. The officer crouched, opening the small door, shining his light inside. Empty, he said after a moment. No signs of anyone hiding here. Sarah leaned closer. The space was immaculate. No scrap of cloth, no handprint, no trail of disturbed dirt. It was here, she whispered, voice trembling. I saw it. The officer sighed, then turned to his partner. Let's do a sweep around the property. Maybe he ran off. As they stepped outside, Sarah lingered by the crawl space, staring into the hollow dark. For the first time, she noticed something strange, small, perfect circles carved into the wood just inside the doorframe. They looked like symbols, shallow but deliberate. Her hand reached out to trace one, and the wood felt warm to the touch, as if it had absorbed the heat of a hand pressed there moments ago. A sudden wave of nausea rolled through her, and she stepped back, gripping the edge of the counter for balance. Outside, she could hear the officers' voices fading around the side of the house. Then, from upstairs, came a new sound, a faint click, like the attic hatch moving. She stared at the ceiling. The air was still again, but she could feel something above her. Watching, waiting. The phone in her hand buzzed softly once. Another message appeared on the screen, from that same unknown number. They can't see him. When the police finally drove away, Sarah stood in her doorway watching the tail lights fade into the fog. The world seemed still again, eerily so, like the silence after a scream. They'd found nothing. No footprints, no fingerprints, no signs that anyone had ever been there. They had asked if she'd been sleeping properly, if she'd taken any medication, if she'd had stress. She'd lied and said she was fine, because how could she explain something she couldn't prove? As the last cruiser turned the corner, she closed the door, locking it once, then twice, though she knew locks didn't matter anymore. Inside, the air felt thicker, heavier. It clung to her like damp cloth. The smell she thought was gone, the faint, earthy rot, had returned, subtle but sharp. Sarah turned on every light she could, flooding the rooms in a warm, artificial glow. The house didn't feel safer, only more exposed. Every surface seemed to whisper that someone had touched it. She tried to convince herself to rest, but when she reached the base of the stairs, her eyes caught on something she hadn't seen before. On the wall beside the crawlspace door, faint but visible under the light, was a handprint, smaller than hers. It hadn't been there earlier. Her heart kicked hard in her chest. She backed away, her mind racing. Maybe she'd missed it before. Maybe the dust had shifted. But deep down, she knew. That handprint was fresh. She turned, moving quickly up the stairs, not daring to look back. Once in her bedroom, she locked the door again and pulled the curtains tight. She sat on the edge of her bed, clutching her phone. The screen lit up once more with a new message. This time, the number was hidden. You shouldn't have opened the crawl space. Her breath hitched. She typed back instinctively, fingers trembling. Who are you? What do you want from me? The reply came seconds later. He does. The room seemed to shift, the shadows deepening around her. Sarah's eyes darted toward the ceiling again, toward the attic hatch she had tried to ignore. The faint smell of earth was stronger now, drifting from above. She grabbed her flashlight from the nightstand, but before she could turn it on, a soft thump came from the attic, slow, deliberate. Then another. Dust fell from the ceiling onto her shoulders. She wanted to scream, to run, but her legs wouldn't move. The air around her pulsed, heavy with something unseen. Her phone vibrated again, slipping from her grasp onto the floor. The screen flickered, video incoming. The file opened by itself. The image was grainy, filmed from somewhere dark and narrow. The camera shook slightly, and after a moment, Sarah realized what she was looking at, the inside of the crawlspace. Her own voice echoed faintly through the recording, panicked, trembling, from earlier that night. The camera moved closer to where she had shined her light before. Then it tilted upward, revealing a wooden ceiling, and through a crack between the boards, the faint outline of her face from above. Watching, unaware, the video ended abruptly, leaving the screen black. Sarah sat frozen in place, the only sound her pulse pounding in her ears. Somewhere above her, a slow scraping began again, something moving in the dark, closer now than before. Sarah didn't sleep. She sat in the corner of her bedroom with the light on until morning, clutching her phone like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to reality. Every time she blinked, she saw the image from the video again. The crack in the wood, her own face staring down at something she hadn't seen. When dawn finally came, pale and gray, she felt no relief. The house was too quiet, like it was waiting for her to move first. She gathered what courage she had and stepped outside, the sunlight sharp and unreal after the night she'd endured. The air smelled cleaner out here, normal, almost safe. But she knew she couldn't stay. Not without answers. She drove into town, every bump in the road jarring her like a gunshot. She didn't even realize where she was going until she pulled into the small county records office near the square. The woman behind the counter gave her a curious look as Sarah asked for the property file on her house. Sure, the clerk said after a moment, tapping at her keyboard. That address has been around a while. Old farmhouse originally. Let me see. She disappeared into the back for several minutes. When she returned, she had a thin brown folder, worn and yellowed at the edges. Here you go? Not much to it. But, she hesitated, her expression tightening. You might want to look at the incident reports in there. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the folder at one of the public desks. There were photographs, black and white images of the house decades earlier, surrounded by empty fields instead of the suburban sprawl it sat in now. Then the newspaper clippings. Local man missing after midnight disturbance. Police discover hidden cellar beneath residence. Her pulse quickened as she read. The details were sparse, but the story was clear enough. In 1978, a man named Thomas Eden had vanished inside the same house. No forced entry, no signs of struggle, only strange markings carved into the wood near a hidden door. The article mentioned one chilling detail. The man had called his wife from the house moments before he disappeared. The recording captured only one phrase, repeated several times. He's already inside. Her stomach twisted. The crawlspace, the symbols, the whispers. It was all there, repeating itself decades later. She flipped through the last pages and found a crude sketch drawn by an investigator. It showed the house's layout, but something was off. Beneath the floor plan, a faint pencil note read, "Second chamber, access sealed." Sarah traced the outline with her finger, realizing there was a section beneath the house even deeper than the crawlspace. She swallowed hard. Someone, or something, had sealed it off long ago. When she finally returned home, the sky had turned a flat, bruised gray. The moment she stepped inside, she knew the house was different again. The air felt alive, vibrating faintly with a hum she couldn't place. Her phone buzzed on cue, as if responding to her thoughts. A new message. You found him. Her breath caught. She turned toward the crawlspace door, and for the first time, it was wide open, blackness yawning beneath the stairs, cold air rising from below. Sarah stood at the edge of the crawlspace, the dark beneath the stairs breathing cold air across her bare feet. She couldn't remember leaving the door open, but there it was, gaping like a mouth waiting for her to step inside. The message still burned in her thoughts. You found him. She should have called the police again, should have run and never come back, but she couldn't. Something in her chest pulled her toward that open space, an invisible tug stronger than reason. She crouched low, flashlight trembling in her hand, and shone it inside. The narrow hollow seemed deeper than before, stretching back farther than the dimensions of the house should have allowed. The beam caught the faint edges of the carved circles again, hundreds of them now, crawling up the wooden beams like growth rings of something alive. She crawled forward on her hands and knees, the smell of damp earth growing stronger with every inch. At the far end, where the wall should have been, she found it, an uneven wooden panel, newer than the rest of the boards around it. Her pulse thudded in her throat as she pressed her palm to it. Warm. She pushed, and it gave with a groan, revealing a narrow opening that breathed stale, cold air. Behind it, stairs, crude, stone, leading down into blackness. This second chamber, the one from the file. Sarah hesitated only a moment before descending. The air thickened as she went down, the smell shifting from earth to something older, iron, dust, decay. Her flashlight flickered, barely cutting through the dark. The walls were rough stone, what in places, carved with the same strange symbols she'd seen above. A faint sound echoed through the chamber, rhythmic, almost like whispering, though she couldn't make out the words. Her throat went dry. "Hello," she called softly. Her voice sounded swallowed, devoured by the air. Then the whispering stopped at the bottom of the stairs, the space opened into a small underground room. The walls were lined with old wooden crates, and in the center stood a single chair. Chains hung from the ceiling above it, rusted but still swaying slightly, as if disturbed moments ago. Her flashlight drifted over the floor, deep gouges cut into the dirt, as though someone had been dragged across it. She stepped closer, heart hammering so hard she thought she might faint. Then she saw it. A small, blackened cell phone lying in the dust. She crouched, picked it up. It was cold, heavy. The screen was cracked, but when she pressed the button, it flickered to life. A single notification glowed through the fracture lines. "1 New video. Unknown sender." Her breath trembled as she pressed play. The video showed the same underground room, but darker. The same chair, the same chains, filmed from a low angle. Then movement, a figure stepping into frame. It was her, or something that looked like her. The same hair, same clothes, same shaking flashlight. The figure turned toward the camera, and as it did, its face blurred, stretching into something that didn't quite belong to a human. The video ended with a whisper, close to the microphone, a man's voice she'd heard before. "He's been waiting for you to come home." The light from the phone died, plunging the chamber into darkness so complete that it felt alive. Sarah stood frozen, her breath shallow, her heartbeat deafening in her ears. She wanted to run, to scramble back up the stairs and burst into daylight, but her legs wouldn't move. The air pressed against her skin, thick, heavy, vibrating faintly like it had a pulse. She whispered, "Who are you?" into the dark, her voice breaking. For a long moment, there was no answer. Then, from somewhere behind her, a low whisper crawled through the room. "You let him out." The flashlight flickered once more before dying completely. She fumbled for her phone, desperate for any light, but the screen stayed black. Something brushed against her shoulder, soft, deliberate, like fingers testing her shape. She spun, but there was only darkness, a dense, physical dark that seemed to swallow her movement. A faint sound began to rise, breathing, slow and deep, from just ahead. She stumbled backward, her hand finding the wall, cold and damp beneath her fingertips. She followed it blindly, searching for the stairs, but the surface under her hand changed. The rough stone became smooth wood. The air grew warmer. The smell of earth faded into something familiar. She blinked, and light flooded her eyes. For a moment, she didn't understand what she was seeing. She was standing in her kitchen again, morning sunlight streaming through the window. Everything looked untouched, clean, ordinary. Her phone sat on the counter, its screen glowing softly with a missed call notification from the same unknown number. Sarah's pulse raced as she grabbed it, hands shaking. The call log read 3:17 a.m., the exact time the first knock had sounded nights ago. She tried to remember how she got here, but her mind was blank. She pressed the replay icon. Heart hammering. A man's voice spoke through the speaker, quiet, steady, almost calm. "Sarah," it said, like it knew her. "You should have left it sealed." The line crackled. He needed a doorway, not a home. The voice shifted, distortion twisting the words. A faint scraping echoed behind it, metal against stone. "He's inside now." The voice continued, softer. "He's always been inside." Then, faintly, the call ended with the same whisper she'd heard before, her own voice saying, "He's been waiting for you to come home." The phone slipped from her hands and clattered to the tile. The house seemed to respond. The walls groaned, the floorboards flexing like something enormous was moving beneath them. A shadow passed across the window, brief, human-shaped, but wrong in its proportions. Sarah stumbled backward, eyes darting toward the staircase. The crawlspace door was closed again, perfectly shut, but from behind it, the faint sound of breathing rose, steady and patient. She didn't dare move closer. Then, with a soft click, her phone lit up one last time on the floor beside her. Video recording started. The camera faced her. Sarah stared at the phone lying on the tile, its red recording light blinking like a pulse. She could hear her own ragged breathing on the tiny speaker, each exhale feeding back through the microphone in an endless loop. The light in the kitchen dimmed, though the morning sun still burned outside. It wasn't fading, it was being taken, one by one. The colors drained from the room until everything looked like an old photograph left too long in water. She whispered, "Stop," but the camera didn't stop. Her phone tilted slightly on its own, the lens turning upward as if it were following something behind her. The sound came again. 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. Not from the door this time. From beneath the floor. The boards shuddered with each hit, dust shaking loose from the ceiling. Sarah staggered backward until she hit the counter. The knocks grew louder, faster, until the sound was no longer knocking at all but pounding, furious and deliberate. Then silence. Absolute silence. The recording light blinked once more and went out. For a long moment, she thought maybe it was over, that whatever had been trying to come through had failed. She pressed her palms to the countertop, waiting for the air to still that a soft voice spoke directly behind her ear. You opened the wrong door. She spun, but no one was there. Only her reflection in the dark oven glass. Except her reflection didn't move with her. It tilted its head, studying her, a faint smile stretching across its mouth. The reflection stepped closer to the other side of the glass while she remained frozen. The smile widened, slow and knowing. Then, gently, a hand pressed against the inside of the glass from her reflection's side, palm first. A perfect print bloomed in fog on her side of the oven door. Her heart hammered as she stepped away, shaking her head. No, she whispered. You're not real. The house groaned again, deep and low. She looked down. The cracks between the tiles had turned black, spreading like veins across the floor. The air smelled of earth and iron, just like the chamber below. She ran for the front door, fumbling with the lock, but when she threw it open, there was nothing outside. No street, no sky, only darkness stretching endlessly forward. The world had folded in on itself. Behind her, the whispering rose again, dozens of voices overlapping, all speaking her name. She turned back toward the crawlspace door. It was open once more, yawning wide, its edges trembling like something inside was breathing. Her phone buzzed in her pocket one last time. The screen lit up on its own, the same unknown number flashing. Hands shaking, she answered. The voice that came through was her own. Sarah, it said softly. Come home. And before she could respond, the light from the phone blinked out, leaving her in the dark with only the sound of slow, patient breathing, just inches away WY morning. The neighbors found her car in the driveway. Doors still open, keys inside. The house stood silent, perfectly normal. Police searched every inch, but found no crawl space, no hidden stairway, no sign of forced entry. The file was closed within the week. Yet, every few nights at 3:17 a.m., the new owners swear they hear a knock at the door, and sometimes, when they answer, their phone rings from an unknown number and a quiet voice whispers, "Don't open it."